Hello friends, James Stevenson. Welcome to part 23 of my Tesla earnings forecast video review series. I am joined as always by my co-host, Loki, who is currently trying to decide whether he wants to come over and eat his breakfast that I offered him in the previous video or not. Looks like maybe he's decided he wants to settle down. Maybe I'll try offering him another kibble and see if that works. There you go, buddy. Not right there. Okay, and while he's deciding if he wants to eat that kibble or not, I will go back to sharing my desktop, where I have a blank spreadsheet. Okay, we have reached the bottom of the detailed model tab, which is the point. Maybe I'll come back to the Loki's bed view in my video chooser over here. I use OBS Studio to make my videos, and say, James, we are 23 videos deep into this series, and you still haven't told us where any of these numbers come from that are in your forecast. Over the next 5 videos, you will see where all of the numbers in my forecast come from that you haven't seen already. Some of them you did see where I was forecasting them below the income statement, but the really important numbers, which are the revenues and the cost of sales, where are those coming from? They're coming from the top of this page. So let me go back to sharing my desktop, and I will scroll all the way up to the top of this monster. And when I get there, we'll be in stage 1 of my forecast process. What's the first thing you want to do when you make a forecast? Well, I decided the first thing to do is to figure out how much stuff you're going to sell. So in stage 1 of my forecast, which I have labeled here on row 5, I'm calling this production and deliveries by site and model. First of all, let's figure out the most important thing, which is how many of each model are we going to sell in each quarter. What's a good process for figuring that out? Well, the way that I approached the problem was, let's do some multiplication. So how many Fremont Model S's can be made in a week? I would suggest that the number is 1,000. They can make 1,000 Model S's per week out of Fremont. And how many weeks of production do they have making Model S? They've got 13 weeks every quarter. Fremont doesn't close very long for holidays, so you may as well just call it 13. Then for production efficiency, how well are they doing? What percentage of this 1,000 vehicles are they actually making per week on average throughout this quarter? So that's what I have here. Last year, these numbers were higher. This year, these numbers are lower. So 72% in Q1 is how you get to this production number. Now, Tesla doesn't report S separately from X, but if you add together the S production to the X production, that gives you the production number Tesla did report for S and X combined. They're only made from Fremont, so you know that 19,437 is the right number in total. And that's how you can get comfortable that these percents aren't crazy out of whack. So I've got a 78% production efficiency for Model X. I think Tesla is selling more X than S at this point. Because the Model 3 Performance is an awful good vehicle, and the Model Y Performance is too. So tough to sell lots of Model S, especially tough to sell internationally. Tariffs are pretty high in most of the places you would ship these cars to, so they are the priciest Tesla vehicles to begin with. And then you add that dynamic and how much less expensive locally produced Model 3s or Ys are. It's tough for S and X to compete, which is why Stephen Mark Ryan will tell you, and Elon Musk has told us, Tesla is only holding on to these for vestigial and sentimental purposes. They don't want to stop producing them, but these are not a huge driver of Tesla's strategic value or earnings anymore at this point, though they are profitable to make and sell. Okay, so what do you do after you have the production? Well, you need to figure out how many of these Tesla could possibly sell max. How do you get to that number? Well, you have to know what the beginning inventory was of this kind of vehicle that Tesla had already produced but not delivered at the end of last quarter. So we know what that number was from the ending finished goods inventory that we had last quarter. That number became the opening inventory in Q1. Then, because a lot of Model S's and Model X's didn't get delivered by the end of Q1, there's a high beginning inventory for both of these vehicles relative to where we're used to seeing inventory levels for these vehicles. So that ought to help sell a lot more S and X vehicles in Q2 than we saw reported in Q1 because there were so many available to be delivered in the first month of the quarter. That's unusual, and it's a result of ending the wave, which I've talked about so many times. I'm not going to talk about it now. So the two of these combined give you vehicles available for sale by the end of the quarter. How many vehicles could you sell? You could sell the ones that you had to start the quarter with, plus the ones you made. Now, that's only a theoretical number. There's no way you could possibly deliver every single one of those, and you shouldn't try. It would cost you a lot of money to try to. So there will be an ending inventory of vehicles. I'm projecting this number to still be pretty high at the end of Q2. I'm forecasting it at 50 days of sales. So the days sales calculation is to take the quarterly total and divide it by 75. So I'm multiplying that by 50 for both of these and saying, hey, if the ending inventory is 2/3 of what got sold during the quarter, then you'll have these ending inventory numbers going forward. So that's where that forecast is coming from. It makes sense to have S and X vehicles available as test drive vehicles at sales centers so that if people want to drive one, if people want to buy one, you'll have something that they can test drive. You're probably likelier to sell them an S or an X if you have one available for them to test drive than if you aren't, and you're probably likelier to sell them an S or an X if you have one on the lot available to sell them. So is it bad to have finished goods inventory that isn't goods in transit? No, you need some of that so that you have test drive vehicles available, and for those buyers who want to be able to walk in and walk out with a vehicle the same day. If you don't have any finished goods ending inventory from the prior quarter that wasn't goods in transit, then you don't have any vehicle you could sell that buyer. This is in violation of the principle people are accustomed to when going to dealerships, where they are allowed to buy a car and drive it home, right? So Tesla for many years didn't have test drive vehicles available and didn't have new vehicles available that they could sell somebody same day. They would just say, hey, use your phone, configure what you want, hit the order button, wait 6 months or a year, and then we'll call you when it comes in, right? Not everybody loved hearing that. So it's probably better for sales to have some inventory available to sell people, right? This makes sense, I think. Okay, so once you have those, you've got your production, you add to your beginning inventory, you subtract your ending inventory, and that is your deliveries. This math is just, hey, production plus beginning inventory minus ending inventory equals deliveries. You must have delivered this many. If you had that many to begin with, and then you made this many more, and then at the end of the quarter you had this many left on hand, unsold, well then this many must have been sold, right? That's how that logic works. Then for deliveries subject to lease accounting, I'm just using a percentage of deliveries based on what it has been in the past, 9, 10, 11, 12%. I'm forecasting at 11%. That seems to be a pretty decent placeholder for how many leased vehicle deliveries there will be. And that's the first two models. The same principle is going to hold true throughout this entire section. I'm doing the same logic, the same math, the same rows for every model produced at every site. So what do we have for Model 3? Well, we've got 8,500 vehicles per week available to be sold. Now, some of this capacity actually has been repurposed to make Model Y at Fremont, which is why these percentages are lower than what they would be otherwise. But if for some reason Tesla decided they wanted to make more Model 3s and less Model Ys out of Fremont, they would be able to make more. They would just be repurposing Model Y production capacity to make Model 3. So that's why I'm keeping the 8,500 in here, even though Tesla hardly ever produces that many Model 3s from Fremont. They had a couple of weeks where they weren't producing Model 3s in Q1, but they should have 13 weeks of production in future quarters. At about the same production efficiency, 60% that we saw in Q1, maybe a little better as the year goes on. Maybe they'll get more efficient, maybe more people will want to buy Model 3s if Tesla's advertising is effective at driving more reservations to be placed. Here we've got the beginning and ending inventory counts. What am I using for days of sales here? I'm using 8 in Q2. Q3 and Q4, so pretty low numbers, but those are consistent with what we've seen in the past. Will I be shocked if these come in a little higher and the deliveries come in a little lower? No. We've already seen with S and X those numbers crept up some, so I wouldn't mind raising this 8 days of sales assumption in my forecast to something higher if we see more ending inventory of Model 3. It can be lower because lower than S and X are because fewer Model 3s are being exported from the US, right? With S and X, those vehicles are going to spend a lot of time on a ship on the ocean, headed to some buyer on a different continent. That's not really true for Model 3, and that explains the big difference in how much ending inventory I'm forecasting. What about for Model Y? Similar to Model 3? Yes. Pretty similar. I've got them being able to make 6,000 Model Ys per week, maximum, from Fremont, with 12 weeks of production in Q1, 13 weeks of production in future quarters, at an 86% production efficiency, which is not crazy, given what they were doing previously, and then maybe a little better in Q3 and Q4. This is the best-selling luxury vehicle in the world and the best-selling EV in the world. It's not crazy to think Tesla will be making more of them from Fremont, as well as their other sites where they make Model Y. Ending inventory, I've got forecast at 8 days of sales. So that'll be, you know, roughly 7,000 vehicles worth of finished goods inventory for Model Ys produced from Fremont. And that's what kicks out these delivery numbers. So if you want to know where my delivery numbers are coming from, that's where. Fremont Roadsters, there aren't going to be any of those made anytime soon. Do I have a forecast for those to happen next year? No. Okay, maybe in 2025 we get a few Fremont Roadsters. This is not very many, folks. That's about 700 Roadsters in 2025. I'm not going to be off by a lot, no matter how many Tesla produces in 2025. That is not very many. Okay, so let's leap across the Pacific Ocean to China and check in on the Shanghai Gigafactory, see what it's producing. They can make about 9,000 Model 3s per week, but as you can see here, they only had 9 weeks of production in Q1. That ought to be better in Q2, 12 weeks. 13 weeks is the best Shanghai ever gets in a quarter. That's the number of weeks there are in a quarter, but they only get it in Q3. You can see in future years, I assume that's the only quarter they can get 13 weeks of production out of. And that explains the little tick downs at the end of every fiscal year on my chart for total deliveries. It's because Shanghai only gets a chance to make big production numbers in Q3 because they have government-mandated holidays in the other quarters when it makes no sense to stay open and pay big penalties with overtime basically to your workers. I think it's double time if you make them work on state holidays in China. So better to just produce in the other quarters and keep your costs per vehicle low. Which is what Tesla does. You can plan for your preventive maintenance to happen during that downtime, etc. It has to happen sometime, so you may as well shut the factory down over the holidays and get that done. Or if you want to do upgrades or line changes or put new robots in and calibrate them, etc., that's a good time to do it. Beginning finished goods inventory, you can see these numbers are higher. Shanghai is Tesla's export hub, so like we saw with S and X, a lot of these vehicles are going to end the quarter still on a ro-ro, a roll-on, roll-off ship at sea, or in a foreign port, or on a truck heading to a sales center, right? So nothing that can be done about that except trying to get this wave smoothed out. So what do I have assumed here? 33 days of sales in ending inventory for future quarters, which is how the Shanghai Model 3 ending inventory will rise from 30,000 to 40,000, 45,000 by Q1 of 2024. And then not very many leased vehicles from Shanghai, only about 5%. Then for the Shanghai Model Ys, they can make 15,000 per week. That's a lot. They only got 10 weeks of production out in Q1. Then we see the same 12, 13, and 12 for the remainder of the year at very high production efficiency per week of operation. So here's what that looks like. If Tesla can maintain very high production efficiency, here's how many they'll produce. You can see the ending and beginning inventory numbers here. I'm forecasting 25 days of sales in ending inventory for Model Y, leaving these vehicle delivery amounts. So peaking at 181,000 in Q3 and then coming back down to 170,000 in Q4 from the Shanghai Model Y line. No small robotaxis. I will need to add those. I'll have to think about where I want to put them. They're going to be made in Mexico, so I may have to add a Mexico section and then move my robotaxis or next generation vehicles. Elon did mention that they're calling them internally robotaxi as they develop them. We don't know a lot about that. We'll find out when there is an unveil. There is strategic importance around when you time the unveiling of products so that you don't Osborne sales of your current vehicles by announcing something that people want to wait for and have later. Okay, next is Berlin. They don't make Model 3s yet. One day they will. They're going to expand Berlin. Maybe at the end of 2025, we'll see the start of some Model 3 production from Berlin in their expansion factory. But for now, they have a factory open, a big one, making Model Ys. They can produce, I'm going to say 7,000 Model Ys per week max in Q2. We've seen them over 5,000 already, maybe over 6,000 from Berlin. I ought to remember that, but I don't at this moment. So I've got them at 65% efficiency on more vehicles produced. So that's a big jump on both volume and rate here, taking it from the 30,000 we saw in Q4, 43,000 in Q1, 59,000 in Q2, and then finishing off the S-curve by Q4. Well, no, really that's just the 12 weeks of production assumption, keeping this number from growing by much more, because you see in Q1 it goes up by a lot more once they get 13 weeks of production back. So I think they'll close for the Christmas holiday in Germany before going back to 13 weeks of production until the following Q4. Okay, so here's what those look like. Ending inventory, I've got 12 days of sales in ending inventory assumed, and vehicle deliveries are these. If you believe the assumptions above, you believe these are the deliveries. So that's Berlin. What about Austin? Very similar story coming out of Giga Texas, with Model Y ramping up to a max theoretical weekly production capacity of 7,000 per week. I don't think we've seen 6,000 per week out of Texas Model Ys yet. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments below. Unless it happens between the day I record, May 21st, and whatever day you're watching this video. I only make one video public per day. So yeah, production efficiency, same story, is increasing at the same time the theoretical maximum production per week is increasing. So if you believe that, and if you believe 12 days of sales and ending inventory, then you believe these delivery numbers. And it's just math, right? So you add that stuff up. Here's Cybertruck. I've got Cybertruck selling 69 units in Q3 with an ending finished goods inventory of 11 in Q3 and 420 in Q4. If these appear to be joke numbers here, that's because they are. It doesn't matter how many you forecast when you're forecasting very low numbers. So I took the opportunity to hide some Easter eggs in here for anyone paying attention to the detailed part of my forecast late in a 69 tweet thread. Then for Semi, they've been making those out of Nevada for a few quarters now. We don't get exact numbers reported at all for these because they're so immaterial. So we have to guess at how many were delivered. I think there were 34 in Q4, 42 in Q1. I've got 100 in Q2. That may be high. I may need to reduce these, but this is what you believe the deliveries will be if you believe that the max weekly production capacity is increasing from 8 to 14 to 20 to 40 by the end of this year, and that the production efficiency is increasing by these amounts with this many weeks of production and these ending inventory counts. I'm assuming 10 days of sales and ending inventory here. And carrying that forward, Semi isn't going to ramp to very big numbers unless they can move it to Austin or someplace else with a larger facility, I think, is what they're going to need to produce a lot more semis per week. Now, they're never going to sell huge numbers of semis because the market just isn't that big for them unless there's like a disruptive change from let's say FSD becoming available, let's say piggybacking, or rather platooning becoming available, where trucking companies can order 10 semis and have their most popular route have a driver in the lead car, followed by 9 other semis chasing it, right? Just playing follow the leader. If it becomes legal, that's a huge cost savings on whatever that route is for that company, right? So if something transformative like that were to occur, maybe there's demand for Tesla to make lots of semis, but that's not what I'm forecasting. So what happens below all those details by model and by site? I add them all up together. So that's what this all sites and models section is doing, yielding these production and delivery numbers that we've seen previously in the summary section below, where I repeated them. Here's the lease accounting numbers, days sales and ending inventory, 12 trailing month average, days of sales and ending inventory. These numbers are going to rise as Tesla ends the wave, but I don't have them growing to crazy high numbers. I don't have them even making it to 25 days of sales and ending inventory. And the reason for that is more localized production. So if Tesla had decided, hey, we're only going to produce vehicles in China, because that's the cheapest place to make them, and then we'll just ship them everywhere on Earth, and if there's tariffs, there's tariffs. That wasn't Tesla's strategy, but if it had been, then there would be 30 or 40 days worth of sales and ending inventory every quarter. We're not going to have a number that high because Tesla has 2 places making Model Y currently in North America, supplying this continent that I'm sitting on right now with Teslas, and because they're making Model Ys in Europe that are close to the buyers for those vehicles. So that reduces the weighted average days sales and ending inventory below what it would otherwise be. And in the next section, what do we have? We have the inventory build or drawdown. This is a fun metric. Tesla's inventory, ending inventory, has been rising as time goes by. It's possible for this number to be negative. I'm not forecasting it to be negative until Q1 of 2025. I'm forecasting it to be 0 effectively for Q1 of 2024, no change. Up 47. Percent leased is shown here, so low single digits. Ending inventory as a percent of deliveries. Some people want to see that number. It is actually in my forecast model. You can see it in my forecast thread on row 170 right here. So this number shouldn't get a lot higher than 33% ever, and I'm not doing that here. And the reason for that is there's 3 months in a quarter, right? Total Fremont, max weekly production capacity. Okay, so we've got a section where we're totaling up Fremont, a section where we're totaling up Shanghai. You can pause and look at these if you want to. Total Berlin section, a total Texas section. And that's the end of stage 1. I'll talk about stage 2 in the next part of this video. So we're done with this one for now. I'll check in with Loki. You can't even see Loki because he is bedded down back here trying to catch some more shut-eye. Lazy chihuahua. And I'll just leave this camera here in case he doesn't want to eat his breakfast until later. And I'll outro and say if you've enjoyed today's video, click the like button. If you're not subscribed to my channel already, why not go ahead and subscribe to my channel over here. Click the notification bell to be alerted whenever I post fresh content. Thank you to everyone who supports me on Patreon or YouTube or by joining my Twitter channel for $3 a month. That's 69 cents a week. And a special thank you to my executive producers, Kathy Kitchler and Halter Ferguson Financial, now doing business as Rebellionaire.com. And I'll see you in the next one.